Hello everyone, I'm Mark Seifter, the design lead for Lost Omens Character Guide, and with me I have the two development leads on Lost Omens Character Guide, Eleanor and Luis.
I'm just here for decoration.
Hi everybody.
That is not true.
So what are we talking about today?
So, today we're going to be telling you guys all about the Lost Omens Character Guide. We're going to start by talking about the organization, since we've talked a lot about ancestries in the past, like when we built that Leshy Hell Knight on a previous stream. So we're going to go through each organization. We're going to give you a behind-the-scenes glimpse of stuff that we thought was cool, weird things that happened during the process, anything else we have to say about each organization. When we finish that, depending on how time goes, we'll talk about other portions of the book that are interesting that you might not know about from the preview so far, and then we'll take your questions at the end. So, without further preamble, let's start with the Firebrands, nearest and dearest to Luis's heart because he wrote them.
Yes.
They're a brand new organization, the only one of the 5 that did not exist before 2nd edition.
Correct. The Firebrand news. So
That's right.
yeah,
And it looks like Oil and Green is making all of the different Firebrands. Oh, thanks for subscribing, Elftero.
Yes, thank you. So as Mark said, the Firebrands are a brand new organization, and the reason they kind of came about is when we were first putting together this book, we were trying to decide, okay, we have enough space to get a handful of organizations in. Which ones are we going to do? First ones that come to mind are things like the Pathfinder Society and the Hell Knights. And then we jumped over to the Magambia because we wanted to put a spotlight on them. And then with recent changes in our setting, the Knights of Lastfall felt like a good spot. And we realized, hey, these kind of seem to line up with the alignments. We have lawful ones, we have neutral ones, but we don't have anything for chaotic. And kind of just...
Except a sword from the Hell Knights to cut them down.
That's true. So one thing that was kicking around in my brain at the time was kind of the Rebel Alliance from Star Wars kind of idea of just this group that kind of gets together and goes out and fights tyranny and stuff. But along with that, James Jacobs threw in the idea of, hey, there's also no groups that are just about adventuring for the sake of adventuring or for glory or for fun.
Fame.
Fame and glory, for fun or treasure.
Yeah.
And I kind of combined that idea of the kind of the rebels and the glory seekers together to form the Firebrands.
And that's how we created the Chaos Heroes.
The Chaos Heroes. That's
Which was
true.
the internal name for a while until Luis came out with the name of Firebrands on the grounds that the name Wonder Seekers was already an organization. It existed among gnomes.
Yeah.
And Firebrands was just an awesome name for the group because they're stirring up little embers of freedom in any kind of place.
If you collect all of the Chaos Heroes, you can use them to defeat Dr. Robotnik.
So for those not in
his
the know about
lawful
the
tyranny.
those not in the know about the Firebrands, the basic gist of the group is that there are basically 2 faces of the group. There are the people who are there to fight tyranny and help others, do the ones that are the do-gooders, and those that are just in it for the fun of it, for the glory, for the fame, for the fortune. And at some point in the history, which you can read about in the book, the original Firebrands were all about rebellion and fighting tyranny and stuff, but soon enough, the name of the Firebrands started getting out there, and at some point, just some pirates down in the shackles decided, hey, I sure do like sticking it to the man by, fighting the oppressive government and stuff. Maybe I want to be a Firebrand. Sure, I'm a Firebrand now. And once that happens, more and more people start just saying, yeah, I'm a Firebrand too. Me too. I'm a Firebrand.
It turns out when you have a chaotic organization with no official membership requirements, and it's a good PR name, it's like if Robin Hood's Merry Men were like anyone could join, and then you're a regular bandit. Why not say you're one of the Merry Men? Everyone likes the Merry Men. They're gonna harbor the Merry Men and protect them. They probably wouldn't protect a bandit who is just some random bandit attacking people on the road. So it makes sense that the glory seekers would want to join this organization. I think it's a well thought out progression.
Yeah, and then as soon as that starts happening, if enough people start declaring themselves Firebrand, it kind of muddies the waters a bit and makes it difficult to keep track of who is or isn't a Firebrand, which is really good for when you're trying to keep a low profile and fighting back against tyranny and things like that, going around trying to free slaves and things like that, you can just say, I'm a Firebrand, and no one will necessarily know who it was that did this, because it could have been any number of Firebrands.
And when you catch a Firebrand, they're so disorganized and that person just may have declared they were a Firebrand. They may not be able to actually tell you about any of the Firebrand hierarchy. So because of the fact that you don't know that if they can tell you or not, the ones who actually know might be able to bluff and claim, oh yeah, I just said I joined the organization. It makes it much harder for law enforcement agencies to be sure of what they're doing when they capture a Firebrand.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
I like how in this illustration it shows that off, because there's a big old fight with epic gnomes and on top of gnolls and riding them around. And then like in the background where you can just barely see it, there's one person freeing all those captive slaves from the thing, and nobody notices it. You
can barely see it. It's not the thing that's in the foreground, because it's those people taking the attention.
One thing I want to point out here is Authoress Dale gave away many subscriptions.
Oh, wow.
So thank you so much.
Authoress Dale is awesome. Authoress Dale gives away subscriptions a lot.
Thanks so much for that. Yeah, so the group as it stands now is just kind of a unconnected bit of mush of different people all over the Inner Sea region.
And they have fascinating sort of interplay with different groups. For example, there are free captains who are in the Firebrands, but also, since the Firebrands work together with Vidrian, which broke Sargava's pact with the free captains and is now sort of a major target of the free captains, that means that there's inherent tension, because the free captains kind of want to go after Vidrian for that, but also some of them are Firebrands who are working with Vidrian, and it's just, when you have a chaotic group, you can have elements within the group that are actually possibly at odds with other elements within the group or within some of their own cohorts. And it's very interesting.
It's not unlikely for one group of Firebrands to be at odds with a different group of Firebrands for any number of reasons. We both wanted to get that cool treasure in the dungeon. How dare you beat us to the punch? Stuff like that. Looks like Night Fox has a question. How much are the Firebrands how much are they about freeing slaves and emancipation? And I would say all the do-gooders of the Firebrands are totally about that kind of stuff. The entire organization as a whole is probably not one way or the other, because of the fact that you can be joining the group for any number of reasons, but there are definitely Firebrands that are
I'll read off the values of the group. Abolition of slavery, exciting and daring acts, fun, helping those who can't help themselves.
Oh man, we should have put fashion in there.
Fashion is very important to them, or bare chests are important to some of them too.
Yeah, that's true. Maybe we'll do some errata.
Can't say bare chests, because what if every last inch of them's covered with hair?
That's true.
So yeah, that's the kind of the basics.
If they're a goblin, they might be especially good at expectorating.
Did we want to talk about the options now?
We can talk about it. We're going through. So
sure.
So I know that when you were talking to me as the design lead about the book, one of the things you were most excited to include in this section was the snap leaf.
Oh yes. So a big inspiration for the Firebrands was just my home group for the Hell's Rebels adventure path, which made use of a lot of tactics for sneaking around and things like that. A lot of rebellion was the name of the game, and one of their most used items was snap leaf. It's an item in first edition Pathfinder that you crack it, you then turn invisible and kind of run away, kind of a get out of jail free kind of thing. And I wanted to bring that back to then immediately point to my player to say, hey, look, it's that thing that we used all the time, snap leaf. It's back. I brought it in, so I made it into a trinket that you can affix onto your gear just whenever you're ready to. If you're
leap off the roof,
running off rooftops, you crack it, you jump off the roof, and you get a feather fall effect, so you can safely get away and make it easier. And I also added things in like the insistent door knocker, which is another thing that they used in the campaign.
Is that just an item you had made up for that campaign, or is it based on?
It's based on a first edition
item.
Yeah, it's another first edition item that you kind of put a door knocker on a wall, and it creates a door, and you can open it up at any time, and then come back and take it with you. So just a free door you can make at any point.
Because when when there's an issue, you just open another door.
Yeah,
for
you just
yourself.
make a new door, new passage.
Statler97 says that we sure are showing off all those open books in front of us.
That's right.
Yes.
Unfortunately, we made Mark promise not to bully Peyton into giving any of them away.
That's because we don't have any giveaways this time of everything on the front of the table, and there's no book on the front either.
Well,
So I'm sorry, you're out of luck.
luckily, if you want to pick up the book, it comes out on Wednesday, October 16th.
That's
so
right.
Very soon.
Subscribers have started to get their PDFs already, I've noticed. So there's all sorts of fun things. That the Firebrand archetype is a double-length archetype, the Firebrand braggart. It can boast all the time. It loves to boast and brag and perform strange and daring acts.
Yeah, so it's all about... So one of the aspects I wanted to play up was just the fun kind of showboating style of it, and I didn't want to limit how you would sneak around and do all that kind of stuff on a particular archetype. You should be able to just do that in general. So I made this archetype all about the bragging and the cool, exciting stuff that you can do do as a Firebrand. So the dedication feat for that is all about saying, hey, you see that chasm? I bet I can jump it. And then if you do it, just the fact that you did it, gives you such an ego boost that you're just so good at jumping for a little while. Or if you say, hey, I bet I can climb that mountain wall, and then if you slip off, your kind of bruised ego makes it kind of tough. I didn't do so well last time. So it's a kind of a risk reward thing. And then from there, I gave a couple different kind of tracks that you could go down if you prefer to do more of that boasting. You can get better at boasting. You can kind of call out your enemies in combat and challenge them and make it harder for them to fight because they're so flustered with all the words that you're throwing at them. Or you could jump around and do stunts and big acrobatic flares and things like that. And there are feats for different aspects of how you can express your showboating and your grandstanding.
If you're chaotic and flamboyant and you want to help or not, you're going to find a good home for you in the Firebrands.
Absolutely.
All right, so shall we move over to the absolute opposite organization, the Hell Knights. If you're chaotic and flamboyant and you want to help or not, the Hell Knights will kill you.
Get out of here.
Yep.
They believe that law is absolute, and they have come to the strange opinion that the extremely lawful evil hell is a model of just law, and let's not worry about the evil. It can be lawful neutral. That's what we think. We're the Hell Knights. And so they take themselves to some very, very strict code called the measure and the chain, where their body and their mind are forced under the maximum amount of discipline based on hell. And there's a variety of orders of Hell Knight, each of which tyrannically pursue a particular type of thing. So for instance, the order of the Rack, they love to pursue truth, by which I mean they will destroy books that are not the current official Chaliak's propaganda, that are clearly outdated and incorrect, that claim things such as that Thrun is not infallible, or other things like that. Whereas the Order of the Pyre like to burn heretics, and the Order of the Scourge are sort of like the internal affairs that go after abuses in power and government. And they each have just sort of a different thing that they like to do. And the Order of the Chain is going to hunt down bandits and murderers and fugitives, so they probably be like Javert, that this guy stole a loaf of bread. All right, this is it.
But you don't have to play an evil Hell Knight. Just if you don't, you're kind of a toolbox.
All lawful all the time. That's really all that matters.
You could be lawful good. It's a difficult balancing act to follow the measure of the chain and stay lawful good, but some Hell Knights pull it off.
Some people complain about lawful good Abderites, but lawful good Hell Knights are just a toolbox.
Oh boy.
Yeah,
so what's the expression "a toolbox" mean?
It's like they're a tool, but lots more.
Okay. That's what I thought, but I had never heard it. Okay.
Oiling Green is asking about the Order of the Torrent, which is the most well-known lawful good.
That's right. It's one of the minor orders.
Yeah.
So by virtue of the fact that they like to help save kidnapped victims, that's actually like a lot more goodly than some of those other things that we were talking about.
So we cover all of specifically Amanda Hammond, who wrote the section, covers all of the orders for the Hell Knights that we've mentioned so far in
Right.
Pathfinder's history, which are the 7 main ones, like the Order of the Rack and Order of the Nail, things like that, but also all the lesser ones that have come in here and there. They don't get as much space for explanation, but yeah, we do mention the Order of the Torrent and the other minor ones.
They get a mention. Luis and I could not quite fit the rules for them into the rules section when we were revamping that for the book, so that's fertile ground for the next Hell Knight expansion to get those lesser orders in there. And we didn't want to do what was sometimes been done before. There's like, well, if you're a lesser order, just take this greater order benefit, because they don't really fit the lesser orders. So there's a question from Kane Blade. Are the Hell Knights specifically tied to Cheliax? Are there going to be a bit more of them being seen outside of there? There are already some citadels that are not in Cheliax. For example, the Order of the Nail that has Citadel Raid near Corvosa. Many of the biggest citadels are just in Cheliax. That's because they were founded in Cheliax by a Chelish founder. But Hell Knights really, their mandate, at least as they believe it, takes them all around the Inner Sea region. So you could find a Hell Knight chasing down that guy who stole bread in Absalom one day and is now has made it all the way down to Nantambu or all the way up to Brevoy. It's like, I've chased you to Nantambu for that bread that you stole, and now you will die.
Lictor, we're being wiped out by rocks. Not now. I need to go get that bread thief.
So wherever order is required, the Hell Knights. One thing we say here, and I think we've established in our canon before, is that if you need order to be maintained, you can pay the Hell Knights to come over and help do that. But
they're a lot like a sports team, actually. If you build them a citadel, chances are they might be willing to come.
The only problem is then you're dealing with the strictest adherence to the law, and if you want to deal with the way the Hell Knights administer the law, so be it, but just keep that in mind.
And they're not beholden to you. Like Corvosa built them a citadel, assuming the Hell Knights would come up and support Corvosa against Magnamar. And then the Hell Knights totally came up and were like, no, we're just going to police everything that's in this area, and we're not going to listen to Corvosan politics. And the Corvosans learned their lesson there.
So what kind of options do we have for the Hell Knights?
We've got some pretty good options for the Hell Knights, because basically the Hell Knight Armiger from Lost Omens World Guide gets some additional feats here, basically to give them special abilities to match their order. The order training, advanced order training, and cross training that lets them learn a little bit from another order. And then that sort of involves some special abilities that Luis helped cook up for each of the different orders that you can then go back and so that you can add on just a customization that is different depending on what your order is. So, for example, we talked about the Order of the Chain who chases the bread thief, and so you might want the Shackles of Law ability, which lets you subdue the bread thief and grab them with 2 actions, or the Sturdy Bindings benefit, which when you critically fail on a check to grapple someone, you only get a failure instead, so they don't get loose. You can't let them go. And when you have someone grabbed and they fail on their check to escape, they get a critical failure, which is super good, because that means they can't try to escape again. Normally they can try 3 times and they'll probably get out. So you can get powers like that, or like the Order of the Pyre helps you burn heretics more easily with resist energy against fire and disrupting spiritual connection to heretical magic. So,
and then, as you were mentioning, building off of the Hell Knight Armiger archetype, we then provided 2 new archetypes to kind of spin off from there, which don't, unlike a typical archetype where you need
they're not brand new, but they're new for second edition.
They're new for second edition. They're new material in this book. Unlike a typical archetype where you normally have to take a few feats before you can then take another one, these just say, no, you're fine if you want to take an the Armiger dedication. You can then immediately go off into these, which are the standard Hell Knight and the Hell Knight Signifer, which are basically the mages of the Hell Knight orders.
That's right.
Atherisdale is saying that you have to make a bread thief for your Arcane Mark channel now.
Oh boy. Now I'm going to have to make an Arcane Mark bread thief. Is that going to be my character on Saturday's episode? Is going to be a bread thief? We're going to find out. It might be a Firebrand bread thief.
Your bread thief had better stand up to a Hell Knight.
There you go. So you can get all sorts of fun abilities, like the ability to glimpse the truth, like a short-term True Seeing as a Helmet Signifer, or Avert Your Gaze as a free action, because the Helmet Signifers always wear masks over top of their face.
Yeah.
And Peyton's reminding me that I should mention that Arcade Mark, the thing that we were talking about, is the Twitch stream that Linda's Ice Palmer and I run. It is on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 7 p.m. and it's on Saturday at 10 a.m. where they're going to make me a character, and now it might be a bread thief. So you can check it out at twitch.tv/arcanemark. So,
all right, looks like
I think we've...
Golemites had a quick question. Are there any Hell Knight-inspired spells in the book? No new spells here. There are some abilities that are akin to spells, like the Greater Benefit for the Order of the God Claw, the Blessing of the Five.
Oh, yeah,
basically lets
awesome.
you heal your downed allies or even bring someone back from the dead if need be, because your faith in the 5 different deities of the God Claw is such that you can
if you
tap into that power.
Be listening.
That's right. And if you can manage to follow all 5 of those without like falling off of a anathema cliff, you deserve to bring people back from the dead. And hey, if you're the Order of the Rack, you can silence heresy by just making someone shut up.
So let's say I want to be a knight, but I don't like all this order stuff. I just want to do good knightly things.
Okay.
What can I do?
Well, maybe the next chapter, the Knights of Lastwall. The Knights of Lastwall were a very interesting idea for an organization, but honestly, for a while in Pathfinder First Edition, they had a problem, which was that their story was sort of a negative story. It was just like, we're going to stand here and nothing's going to happen in this area as long as we don't really, really fail. Nothing's changed. It's the same. It's the same. Passive. It's the same. We're passive. But then suddenly they horrifically failed. And now they become super interesting because how are they going to deal with that? Their entire order was built around the concept of not letting the Whispering Tyrant escape. And in fact, he escaped. So they get crushed. They lose a lot of their people. And honestly, they had to rebuild themselves, pick themselves to rise up from the ashes and reorganize themselves, and they've taken less of that sort of strict hierarchical, we have an exact ranking and this is how we do it approach, and a more of a like sort of a round table, join the knights, fight against the darkness as best as you can approach, which is sort of fascinating and much more welcoming to a PC who wants to join the Knights of Lastwall than ever before. Plus, it brings them all across the world, because so did the Whispering Tyrant's threats.
Well, one of the arms of them is, in fact, chaotic good. So, Arthur S. Dale, we could commission some bread thieves to supply the lines.
That's right. Because of the fact that they're no longer this sort of united front, the people in the Knights of Lastwall have reacted to it in different ways. For sure, there's still Ulthun II, who made it to Absalom, and you might find out more about some of the Knights of Lastwall getting down if you'd played the Free RPG Day adventure that sort of talks about the knights and some of the goblins. But Ulthun II made it to Absalom and sort of represents the last of that hierarchy that still survives. And he's trying to rebuild along with a group that we sort of call the Shining Sentinels, who are sort of more traditional Knights of Lastwall, and there's also this really fascinating new group called the what are they called? The Crimson Reclaimers?
Yep. Yes, Crimson
Reclaimers. The Crimson Reclaimers, and they're the kind of good group Eleanor was talking about. And those Crimson Reclaimers have just really kind of feel that the way that it was done before was wrong. They have like a mysterious power that they gain from a mysterious patron that is really good for fighting undead, and they believe that defending, which is what the Shining Sentinels still want to do, is not enough. That you have to go on the offense. They go into the Gravelands, they fight the undead. They believe that whether or not you think it's impossible, whether or not you think it's hopeless, someone needs to do something, not just try to prevent enemies from doing something.
All right, so it looks like Param in chat has a question. Are the Knights of Lastwall taking up the banner the Knights of Mendev had in PF1? What Param's referring to there is the fact that in first edition, before all the big changes happened with the second edition roll around, big thing was there were crusades in the northeast in towards the World Wound, specifically coming out of Mendev towards to fight the demons of the abyss that were coming out of there. And since then, the World Wound has thus been sealed, but there's still lots of demons around there. So the Knights of Mendev are still around and even trying to clean up things.
Some of them are come to the Gravelands now that they're
some of them may have joined the Knights of Last War.
Yeah. Some of them have joined the Knights of Last War, and vice versa. The Knights of Last War primarily focused on fighting the armies of the Whispering Tyrant, but wherever people need help, wherever good is needed, they still go out there. Like the Crimson Reclaimers are all about getting past enemy front lines and like getting people out who are trapped behind those lines, or taking the fight directly to lieutenants and generals and things like that. So if someone needs help and the Knights are nearby, the Knights of the Last War are nearby, they would definitely help out in Mendev, just as or in the World Wound,
anywhere
in the Sarkoriskar now, just like the Knights of Mendev were doing.
They're shattered, and their symbol is has a shattered shield. They're shattered but not broken by what happened to them, and that does mean you'll find them in a much more variety of locations than you would have found the Knights of Lastwall when they were defending Lastwall. You could find them almost anywhere, like Louise said, wherever they are needed. But I wouldn't really see the Crimson Reclaimers as completely being like a full organized Mendevian crusade against the Gravelands. I see them more in a sense like that small group of people that just go in against overwhelming odds to a dangerous place to try to make a difference, rather than like, we've built an army and we're charging into the Gravelands with that.
The fact that the Knights have been scattered so much and they're pretty decentralized means that there aren't many groups that are larger than like a squadron of a dozen or so people at most. I mean, there are still larger groups, but they typically just congregate in the smaller groups and keep going as best as they can.
I can think of a couple big groups.
Yeah, there are some big groups.
Yeah, there are.
Those are going to be upcoming in other products.
Oh, boy.
If you keep your eye out.
Yeah.
Yes, as yet unannounced products.
Shh. Well, no, one of them's going to be showing up in an announcement.
Okay, fair enough.
I also wanted to... One behind-the-scenes thing that I like is that I'm watching this guy on YouTube. It's Black Dragon Gaming, I think.
Oh, yeah.
Who's, like, coming up with, when our news announces, he likes to show that preview off and his thoughts on the channel. And he stated that he thought the patron of the Crimson Reclaimer was Regathiel, which I found amusing because it says right in this book that a lot of the Crimson Reclaimers think it's Regathiel.
Yep.
Or Vildus.
Yep. So I think that makes sense. I mean, there's bastard swords involved. Gathiel totally is a sort of, we're gonna fight the evil. We're gonna get a kill. We're gonna get a kill each day. So, I mean, it could make sense. There's a lot of possibilities there. One cool thing that's in this section for the rules that was sort of like
last minute.
Yeah, a lot of the rules that are in here are just cool stuff that Isabel, the freelancer, just put in. But there was a last minute thing where Eleanor and Louise were like, but what if we could have something that was like a chainsaw to fight against zombies? And I said, well, we don't have rules for technological items, but what if it was the serrating weapon rune? And they said,
let's do it.
Yes.
Let's do it.
So we have a serrating weapon rune that you put on a slashing weapon, and it has like little fragments that are around where the weapon sort of separates apart and spins around, and you can spend an action to make it spin faster and do additional damage.
Rev up your sword.
It was actually the very first magic weapon I ever got in my very first D&D campaign was a flaming chainsaw sword, and so now I can make it in Pathfinder 2e.
Yes, Sione, or I guess it. That sounds like our iconic, but it's spelled differently. It is definitely intended to give you the magical chainsaw effect, but to be something that like wouldn't break your, oh my gosh, wait, this is sci-fi, very similar to, like, it's magic and the magic is described of how it does it, but it is very much like a chainsaw.
So kind of like what we did with the Hell Knights, we already had an archetype for the Knights of Lastwall in Lost Omens World Guide, the Lastwall Sentinel. And again, you can build off that archetype into the archetypes that are featured here. The Knight Vigilant, who's kind of the
for the Shining Sentinels,
and the Knight Reclaimant, which is more of the Crimson Reclaimer style, and build off of both of those. And one of them is all about defensive abilities and like defending the people around you, while the other one starts tapping into things like the power of the Crimson Oath to just destroy undead utterly.
I feel like the 2 feat names that can just really tell you exactly what they are is that Knight Vigilant has Unshakable Idealism, and Knight Reclaimant has Survivor of Desolation.
Yep. Cool. So, they're not the only ones fighting the good fight, though. I mean,
That's true.
One thing we like to do here in the stat blocks for each of the organizations is mention the different allies that they're involved with, and one of the allies of the Knights of Lastfall, because they needed as much help as they can get, is the Magambia Academy, who is our next organization that we're going to talk about. Oh, actually,
Wait,
one
there's
last
a question
for
from
Lastfall Ark Types. What's the mix of abilities between anti-undead and just fighting evil, protecting the innocent in general? I think if you go with the Knight Vigilant, it's a little bit more on just a general kind of basis thing. The Knight Reclaimant will get you a little bit more undead, but the nice thing about Ark Types is you can kind of pick and choose the ones that are better for your campaign or the adventures you're in. So if you're fighting a lot of undead, just pick the ones that are more undead.
They both have
focused.
at least one undead ability that's helpful against undead that you can just not take if you don't want to fight undead. And the Reclaimant has probably 2 at least that are good against undead. So, all right.
So we're moving on to
Night Fox asks, is it hard for
seems rather hard.
Is it hard? Yeah, it seems rather hard to get Helmet Armiger since you need heavy armor if you are a class that does not have any armor. That's true. You need to put a lot of effort into it if you want to get some heavy armor if you're a class that does not start with armor.
Yeah.
All right, so the Magambia is definitely one of the organizations that we were most sure was going to be in this book, along with the Pathfinder Society, because they're a fascinating organization that has just never fully been explored as deeply as it could have been. And so it was very exciting to have them in this book. For those of you who don't know much about the Magambia, basically it's a school of magic, sort of a school without walls, where you just learn magic in the world from teachers, and it is based on the principles of Old Mage Jiteme, a powerful, mythic, super high-level mage who believed that when it comes down to it, that magic sort of, there are lines that blend magic together. The 4 essences that make up magic, you can find any 2 magics that are sort of near each other, and you can create sort of a syncretic combination of the 2 of them. So primal and arcane magic both have matter or material essence in them. That's the one Jitembe mastered first. That's the one the Magambia is most known for. Halcyon magic combines primal and arcane. But in theory, this would also allow arcane and occult to be combined on a mental facet, or divine and primal on a vital life force facet, or even divine and occult on a spiritual facet. And it's just a really exciting and interesting way of thinking about magic that allows for some really cool rules options and story options too.
Somebody wants to see the picture with the Inati and the bowl
Oh,
of chips.
yeah. It's the Inati and the chips. I actually have it on that page, and so does Luis.
Yeah, you're gonna see it
I'll
better
put it there in the
you're
middle.
gonna see it better from last Friday's Pathfinder
That's right.
Friday.
There you go.
Yeah.
So, last Friday's probably had a better picture of it, but the Inati with the bowl of chips is just an awesome picture.
The naughty boyfriend.
There we go. Sheppy may have subscribed because of the Inati, but I'm not sure.
So
Thanks for subscribing.
Here's my behind the scenes on that picture.
Oh yeah, tell us about that, please.
So Peacock Spiders, we based the Inati's appearance on. They can sort of flatten their abdomens and push it up to do that little display, but they only do that if they're trying to attract a mate. So when we got the sketch back from the artist, we were just like, hey, maybe flatten that down a little. I think that they were either too far into it, or we weren't strong enough worded about it because they didn't. So now it's just a student romance there. That spider's going for it. He's got the senpai notice me face on.
That's right. Notice me, senpai.
So, I like pretty much all of our organizations that we feature in this book. The Magambia isn't just kind of stuck in one place, or not.
Sure. It's centered in Nantambu.
Yeah,
that is where the school, exists in the sense that you would think it does, even though it's not like a big white building where you go.
That is where the campus is.
Yes.
But the students that are part of the Magambia go all across Galarian to study magic, to help other people, things like that. So just like with any of these other organizations, the prominence of a Magambia member is just as likely as a Firebrand or a Pathfinder member as well. So that's another thing we wanted to the reason that we wanted to pick the Magambia is because, one, we hadn't had a chance to really bring them into the spotlight, but two, because they fit very well in terms of like, oh, these can be found pretty much anywhere, and any character or any player that wants to play one of these Magambia characters, it makes perfect sense to be wherever the heck you want. If you're in Barissia, if you're down in the Mwangi, or all the way up in Numeria, things like that, it would make just as much sense as with any of the other
Green
organizations.
says the whole world's a Magambian campus, and he would know because he is the secret identity of Andrew Mullen, the author of the Magambia section.
Way to blow his cover on stream.
There you go.
It's not really a secret.
I had a question there. What was our favorite
Section
to work on while working on this book?
Okay.
I mean, I want to say Pathfinders, or the Firebrand. Sorry.
Oh yeah.
But I really enjoyed the.
You didn't get to double dip like that.
Yes, I'm sorry. The new ancestries that we featured, the Leshy, the Lizard Folk, and the Hobgoblin, which were just really fun.
The Leshy was my favorite section to work on because it was easy to work on and cool.
Because you're an easy mark. Yeah,
I am a very easy mark.
I think mine was also the new ancestries, especially because we get to go in there and go with those new intros. We hadn't the freelancers, not all of them had provided them because they hadn't actually been settled in the new rules yet. They had to write all of this stuff before the rules were even out the door. So I had to add in some of the things where it was just like, some people think this of you, and maybe you're like this. As well, you have to think about how these people fit into the world around them and what people think of them and what they might be like. So that was quite a bit of fun.
Awesome.
And then we have to make up a bunch of names for all of them.
Yeah. And it's all the Arcane Mark Leshy emojis.
Yeah, Leshy infested. Get the roundup.
There we go. So Magambia had some cool options.
Yes, absolutely. So the Magambia itself is broken up into 5 branches of within the school itself, and you can kind of focus on different things depending on which branch you're connected with. So, for example, the Emerald Bows, I think, are the ones that are kind of more the defenders of the Magambia. And
is that the Tempest Sun Mages?
Or is that there's
Oh man, there's 5 and they're awesome, and it's hard to remember which one is which.
Okay, which one are you guys trying to figure out is what?
Okay, so I think the Tempest Sun Mages are the defenders.
There we go.
Those are the defenders.
Yes.
Cascade Bearers are the researchers.
I think the Emerald Bows are the ones who just like go out to everywhere and infiltrate. I mean, they'll say they're not spies.
They're not spies, they're guides.
They're just guides. And then
the Rain Scribes.
No, the Rain Scribes are the ones who are actually guides. The Emerald Bow, they'll be like, oh yeah, and we're just sort of sending back information.
They're
envoys. Yes, that's the Uzanjanti are the storytellers, and then the Cascade Bearers are the ones that
they're the researchers.
They're the researchers. They're the ones who are trying to get closer and closer to combining even more types of magic together into the Halcyon Whole.
So as a member of the Magambia, you then kind of join up with one of the branches, and we created options for each of the branches we have options here for each of the branches to kind of show that specialization. Like, for example, the Rain Scribes being guides, they have the option to kind of clear difficult terrain around with some of their abilities if you take the Magambia Attendant archetype for that. So.
Yep. Because the Attendant is the name of one of the ranks in the Magambia. Mm-hmm. Basically, it's sort of a full member of the Magambia. You're not just the complete neophyte, but you're able to perform a little bit of your own study, start joining in with one of these branches. And there's some even higher ranks above that, such as Conversant, and when you get to even higher ranks, you might become a Halcyon Speaker, mm-hmm. which are is a second archetype that requires attendant dedication and really starts giving you some of those blended spell slots that you can use to spontaneously pull out primal or arcane spells. And it's great for if you are a spontaneous spellcaster, because it adds them new spells directly into your repertoire, which none of the multi-class archetypes or other archetypes that give you spells do that. Meaning that all of your dirtiest tricks that you can do from your own main class abilities can apply to the spells you got from Halcyon Speaker too.
We have a few questions here. Sione has a question. What Hell Knight's abilities would be good to use as substitutes for the Order of the Torrent? What I would recommend is looking at the Order benefits that we give out already and using those as a kind of guideline for where they would land in terms of power. And I would look specifically at the domains for ideas about like liberation and things like that to kind of inspire the ability. You might just say you get those domain abilities to break people free, or the liberator abilities from the champion class would also be a good call there. What would be the title of your postdoc Megamian thesis?
We all joined Paizo to avoid higher academia.
Maybe some more literally than others. I don't know. Maybe it could be something like Rain.
Rain?
Could just be the name.
Just the entire thing.
Like Rain question mark.
Rain question mark.
Really risking it on your thesis advisor there, I see.
There you go.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, there was the whole Rain thing that they were studying for their thesis in the short story.
Yeah.
So we have one more group to do, which is the Pathfinder Society.
Talking about a globe-trotting group.
They are the most globe-trotting of all the globe-trotters. Pathfinder Society, well, that's the name of the game, folks. They are a group, if you don't know about them, that are archaeologists that want to bring stuff back to put it in their vaults or in a museum. They love to explore places, report about that, and cooperate with each other so much that their motto is explore, report, cooperate. It's either that they love it a lot or that sometimes Pathfinders don't remember, so they had to make it the motto. And they have 4 really cool factions: the Envoys Alliance, which like to cooperate even more so
They're
than
all
usual.
about furthering the Pathfinder Society.
The Grand Archive, which like to report even more so than usual.
All about collecting knowledge.
The Horizon Hunters, who like to explore even more so than usual.
They just travel a lot. They like to see cool places.
And the Vigilant Seal, who want to make sure that like really dangerous stuff gets destroyed or kept in a safe place where it isn't destroying Golarion. Because how many times have we said this artifact could risk destroying all of Golarion? Like a lot of times.
Yeah, and there's been plenty of times with Pathfinders delve into a dungeon and suddenly unleash something, and, someone's got to take care of that.
Yep. And then not only are these factions that Pathfinders could join, there's also sort of schools that Pathfinders use to train. Unless they're a field commissioned agent where they just did write a thesis of some kind of Pathfinders, like, well, we like this thesis, you're just in. Normally, you spend a few years training, and you focus on the teaching from the Masters of Scrolls, Spells, and Swords. Now, Scrolls may sound like it's similar to spells, but it's actually about writing and learning and recording information. Spells is just like it sounds like, it's about magic, and Swords is about fighting and protecting your allies.
And survival. Surviving
is very important, so you don't need to fight literally with a sword. You can punch people and be in the swords. Or be very associated with them. So for this chapter, there's a special mastery archetype: Spellmaster, Swordmaster, and Scrollmaster for each of those schools.
Yeah. Pharaohs in chat had a question there. Are other world factions like the Aspis Consortium mentioned or listed? Yes. At the very beginning of this chapter for the organizations, right before you see all the cool Firebrand stuff, there's a listing of other major organizations in the world, like the Sword Lords, the Bellflower Network, Aspis Consortium is one of them, things like that. The Red Mantis Assassin are featured here. So we give them a brief rundown in the intro, and then later they show up as part of the theme templates.
Yeah, the theme templates.
I don't think James Jacobs would have let us publish the book without mentioning the Red Mantis Assassins.
Yeah, I think for a while he thought that the Red Mantis Assassins were a group that was in the book too. But they are not, but they have some really cool options in Lost Omens World Guide, and they have a theme template.
Yeah. So the Pathfinder Society, because they're all about exploration and adventuring and things like that, have a lot of gear in this book to help out with that kind of stuff. I mean, you have the typical Wayfinder, which you find in the core rulebook now, but we have a few other Wayfinders, like the Shining Wayfinder, which is all about blessing you. It's kind of got that divine spark there. Or
the Vanishing Wayfinder.
The Vanishing Wayfinder, things like that. So we have a couple of different options for just general gear that you can take as a Pathfinder. And kind of another general thing we had is the Pathfinder Agent archetype, which was in the Lost Omens World Guide, which is if you're not kind of specializing in any of the 3 schools, you're not too crazy about spells or swords or scrolls, you can just take the general Pathfinder Agent and do the jack of all trades kind of thing.
And we got 4 new feats.
Yeah, a few more feats for that as well.
Plus cool feats for the masters like Shoulder Catastrophe, where you can just turn a critical hit against your ally into just full damage to each of you and your ally, which is usually a lot easier to deal with than one person taking double.
Yeah. And it also would remove any critical hit effects as part of that as well.
That's right, which is very, very important if the enemy has like fatal on their weapon. It's like, oh, it's a pick. That really helped out.
Yeah. So, and the other archetypes, the Spellmaster, for example, is all the one thing I really like there in a similar vein is Absorb Spell. What you can do is, as a reaction, if you critically succeed on a save against a spell, you kind of take in that energy, but keep it with you, and then later throw it back at an enemy if you like.
Right. Only against a foe spell, you can't try to abuse it with your allies or something like that. But yeah, it's super cool.
Yeah, a lot of fun stuff here, and I'm sure all 5 of these organizations will have a chance to support more in the future, and give them more feats if you want more braggart feats, things like that.
Right. And we're going to go to questions soon, but since we mentioned theme templates, I want to tell them what it is, because I don't think it was in any of the blogs.
Yeah.
So theme templates are an absolutely cool idea that I feel like John Compton came up with them at a brainstorming exercise like early on in the book's conception, or at least the initial idea, and then Eleanor and Louise sort of refined down what it would be. And what we've got here is these little mini templates for organizations all the way from Alduri Sword Lords to Whispering Way alphabetically. And they are they're simple. They only do a little bit to the stat block, but they really make you feel like that character has now become a member of that organization, an NPC or a monster. So if you want to have, for example, and there are examples of monsters that you can use that are in a...
Go back for that.
Oh yeah, that's at the beginning. So it's before all of the stat blocks. So like if you wanted to have a
centaur Hell
Knight, you could figure that out. If you want a brass dragon Firebrand, for example, then your brass dragon would get the chaotic trait. Well, okay, that's fine. Remove the lawful trait. They would gain acrobatics and athletics. Their speed would go up. Depending on how high level they might gain deception, diplomacy, and or intimidation with confabulator, glad hand, or battle cry skill feat, and they might gain heroism and the Bravo's determination feat from the archetype itself. So depending on how high level they are, they might just add all of those things, and then we give some guidance that says, hey, look, usually you might be able to just sort of put in all these abilities, raise the numbers a little bit, and say that it's 1 level higher and it's a Firebrand. But if you want to keep it the same level, just take away a small number of the side abilities of the monster to make up.
And if you got this book, it's a perfect thing to play around with if you just grabbed our monster building rules that we put out earlier this week. I mean, that's the perfect time to start messing with that. And one other thing that we did in that same section is we wanted to show some examples of that, which was a thing we had kind of a late addition in the development of the book. But we wanted to show you what do these theme templates look like once you apply them to a creature. So one thing that was that we added was a stone giant monk that is tied to the Houses of Perfection, and it has its extra abilities that it gained from the theme template.
House of Unyielding Iron.
Yeah, and also we took a changeling and added the Hell Knight theme template onto her to just show, hey, this is what it looks like in play for both a monster and kind of a more NPC styled character.
Absolutely, and the Hell Knight Changeling, we did a little bit more work and we explained what we did because there were some problems. It's metal armor is anathema for druids, and we put it on a druid. We changed to a primal sorcerer. Yeah. So there's all sorts of fun stuff in the book, but I think now is a good time to move on to your questions. And we've answered a few as we went along, but do you have any build-up of questions? And it doesn't have to be about the organizations. It can be about the ancestries or anything else that's in the book, which at this point would be the sample NPCs, because we just talked about the organizations and the theme templates.
Yeah, or even the ancestries and things like that.
Yep.
While we're waiting for a few questions, I think I answered
what your favorite part was, but we didn't.
We got Eleanor's. Eleanor said it was.
Oh no, we all did. We said it was. We all said it was new ancestries, and I said particularly Leshy.
Specifically, what's your favorite new mechanical option in the book? Because I'm a big fan of the Talden ancestry feat.
The one where you pretend that everything's fine.
Yeah.
And so the will-o-wisp doesn't get to drink your fear because it thinks that you aren't afraid.
Yeah, the keep up appearances where you basically keep a stiff upper lip when something is going wrong, just to show that you maintain your noble composure. And
that one's cool.
Yeah.
I like the Leshy option where you grow extra long branches and then lose a damage die, but turn your weapon into a reach weapon.
Mm-hmm.
I think I like the Leshy seed pod feat just because everybody has mentioned them being Deku scrubs now.
Yep.
It's pretty
Best
accurate.
part is it didn't list the range increment.
Well, tell them what the range increment is.
We have probably 10 feet like a lot of the other thrown things, since the regular Leshy in the bestiary has just a max range of 30 feet, and this is now a weapon that has an increment. But we don't have an official one yet.
Yeah, we'll get that sorted out very soon.
We've got a question from Calvel's.
Oh yeah,
Tyler,
what of the NPCs in the book is our favorite? I think that's what the question means. It says, which of the official NPCs is your favorite?
Yeah, so there's a section in the back where we just present NPCs from each of the organizations. One is a 4th level NPC, which is kind of your general member of that organization, and then 11th level one, which is a higher ranking member. And I feel like the default, like, who else but Captain Octoboots?
We're all probably going to answer Captain Octoboots.
So we have a Pathfinder Adventure Captain who has really cool like diving gear and has an octopus kind of latched around the
we weren't even responsible for any of that. The artist just gave us back Captain Octoboots here.
Yeah. I'm going to say that because of the fact that Captain Octoboots sort of just came in from the artist and no one was expecting it added a venture captain, which adds complication to dealing with the venture captains in the world. It otherwise would have been my favorite, but instead my favorite is probably one of the Magombians, maybe the Tempest Sun Mage.
Cool. And for those who check out that section, the sidebars each have a little basic rundown of that character's story and personality, which you can thank Eleanor for that. She did the work on bringing all these characters to life, which was just great.
So Lori is wondering, what is the definition of organization in Pathfinder 2nd Edition? Wouldn't a villain with just like an army of minions also count as an organization?
Yeah, I'd say so.
Could be. Like if you want to create an organization theme template for your homebrewed villain that you just stick on to the army of minions, and let's say your homebrewed villain is like an evil ice queen who like wants to turn all of the world into ice, and you make like the Ice Queen's army template, and it gives some ice abilities and resistance to ice, and you can make a theme template for your organization.
One thing we wanted to do is we have a stat block for each organization, much like you would with like a settlement, for example, that gives you the basic rundown of, here's the typical alignment for its members, here's the stuff they typically have access to, like, they have lots of weapons and they have good contacts and transportation, things like that. And we wanted to make sure that this stat block kind of works for any organization, regardless of how big it is. The ones featured in this book are one of the probably the bigger ones in the entire Inner Sea region, and that's works. This stat block works just as well for anything that's like, hey, we're just a group that gets together to play poker every other week. And
that's right.
We're drinking buddies.
We're the poker band, and if it's 12 members, that still can fill in a stat block just as well as any other group. So it's pretty versatile. You can just call anything an organization as long as you think you can kind of have enough members for and membership requirements and things like that.
So Sione says, you mentioned theme templates in monster creation. How do those work exactly? So they work the way I described when I gave the example with the Firebrand theme template. They are basically a grouping of abilities that, depending on the level of the monster, you apply all the abilities that are at that level or under to the monster, either removing a few abilities from the original monster or bumping its level up and giving it a small stat boost to its numbers. And then, voila, you just have a monster that really feels like, or an NPC who really feels like they're a member of the organization.
If you're building a monster from scratch with the monster building rules, though, what you would want to do first is make your monster, and then once that's all done, then apply the template after all of that, because you could do it as part of the process. But
honestly, if you're building it from the monster building rules from the get-go, you don't have to do that, probably. You could just, during the... so if you have the file, open it up. Step 1 is concept and roadmap.
Yeah.
So... we have some roadmaps in there, like the Barbarian roadmap, the Fighter roadmap. Guess what your theme template just became?
The
Hell Knight roadmap.
That's true.
So you put that in with another roadmap as part of your concept and roadmap right from the beginning, and the concept roadmap says come up with some abilities you're going to put in there. Well, you've got them. They're from the theme template. So it actually, rather than even having to do it at the end necessarily, if you do it at the beginning, it makes it like... probably 3 times easier to write the monster because some of the work's done for you in the theme template.
So, question here from Kane Blade. Does the character guide talk about any organizations in brief? Yeah, we at the very beginning of the organization section, we give a rundown of about 10 or so other organizations like the Bellflower Network, the Eagle Knights, Lion Blades. We don't get to cover every organization throughout the history of Pathfinder. Unfortunately, just not enough space for that. So unfortunately, we don't have anything on the Pirates of the Shackles. They do show up as being mentioned with like the Firebrand entry.
Some members, some foes.
Yeah, some free captains are kind of involved with that whole story.
Expectation management, there are 8.
8, there you go. And the Order of the Palatine Eye, unfortunately, doesn't make the cut here, but they do show up, I think, if I'm not mistaken, in Gods and Magic, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so you can look at them there.
Because they're sort of also not just an organization, but sort of a life philosophy. So
yeah, so you can check them out in a few months when that book comes out.
Yep.
So let's see. Do we have?
Oh yeah, we've got another one. Were there any major changes to the organization from first edition to second? Not because of the rules changing, but because of the world changing. Like we mentioned, the Knights of Last Wall. Oh boy.
Yeah.
They are not the same as they were back when they were just stopping the Whispering Tyrant from escaping. Now that they are reeling from his escape and destruction of most of their knights. So, all the changes happened because you guys played the adventure paths and your heroes fought those adventure paths, told those stories, and changed the world. Not because, like, second edition came in and the rules made the different organizations change.
Yeah.
So they're asking, is there a relations section among the organizations? Because obviously the Hell Knights and the Firebrands do not get along well, but what about that? So there's actually a few different relations sections. There's an enemies section, and that talks about who they really, really don't like. But there's also an allies section. So there are definitely some groups. I think Luis mentioned that the Magambia are helping the Knights of Last Wall and their friends.
Yeah, and we have
and Eleanor pointed out just there where she literally pointed. Why don't you tell them?
There are some relationship sections in the sidebars of the thing that specifically spell out how the organizations interact with specific other groups. It's not as robust as probably everybody would like it, simply because we can't write you an essay on intergeographical politics. You're gonna have to do your own thesis on that. But we do sort of give a rundown of the major relationships that are in this setting, especially with other organizations in this book.
So Pharos asks, do the Knights of Ozem still exist in the form that they're called the Knights of Ozem, or are they now subsumed into the Knights of Last Wall?
We don't really talk about that. I mean, you could probably have some people running around calling themselves the Knights of Ozem, but they probably look kind of dumb. I think most of the ones you want to follow are in the Knights of Last Wall.
That makes sense. All right, then. So thanks for all of your questions. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed learning a little bit more about these organizations. We're going to wrap up for now, but before we do, I'm going to tell you what next week's Paizo Friday is. So it's a very exciting episode. If you haven't already read it in yesterday's blog, Liz Liddell is the new designer on the design team that's working together with me on that team. So I'm going to be on with Liz next Friday. We're going to talk about the game mastery guide, and she's going to tell you about some of the sections she worked on when she first started to join, and we said, okay, great, do these game mastery guide sections. I'll talk about some of the rest of the game mastery guide. It'll be things that you have not yet seen on our next big RPG book. So don't miss next week's Pathfinder Friday. Until then, I'm Mark Seifter.
I'm Luis Loza.
I'm Eleanor Ferron.
Have a great weekend.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.